Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 18th December 2021. And the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. So let us start the discussion. This article on page number 10 is related to some of the changes that have been proposed in a bill that has been introduced in the parliament regarding amendments to the Biological Diversity Act of 2002. In this regard, it has been said that the bill that has been introduced in the Lok Sabha prioritizes commercial trade at the cost of conserving biological resources. In this regard, we will first have to understand what was the objective of formulating the Biological Diversity Act 2002 in the first place, and what are some of the important provisions that are now being amended through this introduction of the bill in the Indian Parliament. So the points that we discuss here can be important for us from General Studies paper 3 point of view in the topic environment. Also, some of the things that we discuss here will be important for us from the prelims examination perspective as well. So let us look at all these things in detail now. Now, biodiversity, as we all are aware, consists of both animal as well as plant diversity, and it includes the species as well as genetic diversity. In this regard, the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, or the UNCBD, aims at conservation of this biological diversity that exists on our planet. In this regard, one of the concerns with the biological diversity, or one of the issues that was being faced by the biological diversity, was that the kind of economic development that we are pursuing was leading to the extinction of some of the species in the biodiversities, including the animals as well as the plants. And that is why the commercial exploitation of these resources or biological diversity resources was not sustainable in manner. And that is why the UNCBD provided for conservation of biological diversity in the first place from an ecological point of view. Secondly, it focused on sustainable use of the components of biological diversity. That is, it tried to integrate the use of the biological diversity on the one hand, as well as its sustainability for a long term, so that the biological diversity does not get extinct in the long run. And that is why it proposed a new feature, that is sustainable use of all the components of biological diversity. Now, sustainable development simply means that even when the biological resources or the biological diversity resources are being exploited for economic or commercial purposes, it should be done in such a manner that the resources do not become extinct and are also available for the next coming generations. And that is what is meant by sustainable use of components of biological diversity. Further, another issue that was there was that some of the biological diversity that we have, when it is exploited for commercial purposes, the benefits are not transferred to the communities or the place from which such biological diversity is arising. And that is why the third objective of the UNCBD was fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising out of use of genetic resources. So, when a commercial exploitation of any kind of biological diversity was being done, it should also benefit the community from which these resources have been extracted for the commercial purpose. And that is what is meant by fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising out of utilization of the genetic resources. And in order to make this fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising out of utilization of genetic resources a reality, a Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing was passed in 2010. So the UNCBD was passed in 1993, and in addition to the UNCBD was passed the Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing, with specifically aiming at the third objective of the UNCBD. Now, it provided for access to genetic resources and fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising from their utilization. Now, as India is a signatory to the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, and in accordance with its commitments to the UNCBD or the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, the Government of India passed the Biological Diversity Act of 2002. Now, this provided for the conservation of biological diversity, sustainable use of its components, that is, the commercial use in a sustainable manner, and also fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising out of the use of biological resources. It aimed at ensuring the benefits derived from the use of biological resources and associated traditional knowledge are shared in fair and equitable manner among the indigenous as well as the local communities. So we are aware that on the one hand there is biological diversity, and this biological diversity will be used for economic purposes, and such use should be sustainable in manners. So sustainable use form the second part of the UNCBD as well as the Biological Diversity Act of Government of India. And when the use of biological diversity is aimed at for commercial purposes, the benefits that arise out of such use should be shared in an equitable and fair manner. So, equitable sharing of the benefits was another factor. So, these are the three principles of the UNCBD, that is, we realize the importance of biological diversity, so we aim at conserving them. Then we aim at using these resources sustainably. And if the use of biodiversity is for economic or commercial purposes, it should lead to fair and equitable sharing of the benefits that arise out of such use. Also, as we have learned in this part, the benefits that are derived from the use of biological resources and the associated traditional knowledge should be shared in fair and equitable manner among the indigenous as well as the local communities as well. Now, how does the Government of India aim at securing or conserving the biological diversity and meeting its commitments under the Convention on Biological Diversity or the UNCBD through the Biological Diversity Act of 2002? So, in this regard, the government has created a decentralized three-tier mechanism. So, at the top of this hierarchy is the National Biodiversity Authority. It is followed by the state biodiversity authorities, and then we have the Biological Diversity Management Committees. So these BMCs are created at the local body level, at the Panchayati Raj level institutions as well as the municipal bodies. So these are the third layer, or the, you can say, the decentralized layer of biological administration. Then above this we have the state biodiversity authorities, and at the top of the hierarchy is the National Biodiversity Authority. Now, in this regard, the state biodiversity authorities have a key role to play because their main function is to regulate by granting various approvals for commercial utilization of any biological resources by the people. And that is why their approval is sometimes seen to be mandatory. Further, the biodiversity management committees that have been created at the local body level, they aim at basically registering all the information on availability and knowledge of local biodiversity resources, their medicinal or any other use or any other purpose. So the BMCs are the bodies which aim at comprehensively collecting the information related to the biological diversity resources and their traditional use. The SBA or the state biodiversity authorities focus on providing the approvals for any commercial utilization of the biological diversity resources. So these three bodies act in tandem, and these are interconnected in ensuring the access and benefit sharing while accessing the biological resources for various research, patents, transfer of the results and commercial utilization of the biological resources. So this brings us to the proposed amendments to the Biological Diversity Act of 2002 under the Biological Diversity Amendment Bills 2021. Now the need for this amendment or need for bringing these amendments, as have been stated by the government, is that the commercial exploitation of the biological resources was becoming difficult because of the compliance burden under the regulations that have been provided in the Biological Diversity Act 2002. And various concerns were raised by stakeholders like the Indian System of Medicine sector or the Ayush sector, the seed sector, industry sector as well as the research sector. And they wanted the government to simplify, streamline and reduce the compliance burden in order to encourage conducive environment for collaborative research as well as investments. They also wanted the government to simplify the patent application process. And at the same time, these bodies wanted the government to reduce or relax the burden of benefit sharing with the local communities for further conservation of biological resources. In this regard, the government is aiming at bringing the amendments to the Biological Diversity Act of 2002 for the following purposes. First of all, it wants to reduce the pressure on wild medicinal plants by encouraging the cultivation of medicinal plants. Now, medicinal plants, as we all are aware, are traditional biological diversity resources, and they are found in some of the remote areas of the Indian forests. Now what happens is that their commercial exploitation becomes difficult, and at the same time, because of their inherent value, they are valued too much by the commercial sector. And that is why, to reduce the burden or reduce the pressure on these traditional medicinal plants, the government wants to encourage the cultivation of medicinal plants. This is because when the commercial cultivation of the medicinal plants will take place, it will automatically reduce the burden on existing medicinal plants in the remote biodiversity locations. Further, we all are aware that the Government of India has been promoting the traditional Indian medicine system through the Ayush, that is the Ayurveda, Unani, etc. In this regard, the government wants to encourage the Indian system of medicine and that is why it has exempted the Ayush practitioners from intimating the biodiversity boards for accessing biological resources or knowledge. Now, we have already learned that the state biodiversity authorities were responsible for providing approvals for the use of or commercial use of the biological diversity resources. And that is why the government has now exempted the Ayush practitioners from intimating the biodiversity boards at the state level for accessing the biological resource or knowledge. Further amendments have been brought out in the Biodiversity Act to facilitate fast tracking of research, patent application process, transfer of research results, while utilizing the biological diversity resource in India without compromising the objectives of the UNCBD and its Nagoya Protocol. Also, the government has changed some of the provisions related to penalties that were related to the violation of the Biological Diversity Act, and that is why it has decriminalized certain provisions so that this becomes easy for the commercial exploitation of the genetic resources. Also, the government of India aims at bringing more and more foreign investments in the chain of biological resources. It also aims at promoting research, patent, and commercial utilization without compromising the national interests. So, overall, the government of India wants to relax the commercial usage of the biological diversity by providing certain exemptions, that is, decriminalizing certain provisions, also exempting the Ayush practitioners, also to promote the foreign investment and research in this particular sector. However, these amendments have not been taken in good light by the environmental practitioners or environmental activists. Now, first concern that has been raised regarding these amendments is that they do not adhere to the prior informed consent requirement of the Nagoya Protocol. Now, we have already understood that the Nagoya Protocol is basically related to fair and equitable access and benefit sharing with the community as well as the providers of these biological resources. In this regard, the Nagoya Protocol provides for prior informed consent. Now, the responsibility for this prior informed consent should lie with the biodiversity management committees that are operating at the local body level. However, this right of the biodiversity management committees at the local body level has not been recognized under the Biodiversity Act 2002 as well as under the amendments that are being brought. That is why the activists are saying that the new amendments do not adhere to the prior informed consent requirements under the Nagoya Protocol. In this regard, let us understand what is basically meant by this prior informed consent. Now, as we all are aware that the biological diversity resources are found at the ground level, and that is why the responsibility of collecting information about the biodiversity as well as its traditional use and the traditional knowledge associated with this biodiversity lies with the local body or at the panchayat and the municipal level. And that is why the biodiversity management committees have been created. In this regard, the Nagoya Protocol provides that there should be prior informed consent before any use of biodiversity for commercial purposes. So this simply means that enough opportunity should be provided to the people at the local level to understand the impact of any particular usage of the biological diversity. Secondly, informed. Informed simply means that all the relevant information should be provided to the stakeholders. And it simply means that all information needed to make a decision about whether or not to provide or withhold the consent to a project or development. And finally, consent simply means giving permission to a particular project or agreement, and that is why the role of BMCs should have been critical in providing this prior and informed consent for the utilization of biodiversity under India's commitment to the Nagoya Protocol. However, this has not been kept into account while bringing these amendments to the Biodiversity Act of 2002 by the way of introduction of this new bill in the Lok Sabha. Now, second concern has been raised regarding the exemption that has been provided to the Ayush practitioners or the traditional Indian medicine practitioners. So in this regard, the Ayush practitioners can access any biological resource and its associated knowledge for commercial utilization without giving prior intimation to the state biodiversity boards, and this is one of the key issues. Now, we have already learned that the state biodiversity boards regulate by granting approvals and requests for commercial utilization. However, this requirement has been done away for the Ayush practitioners, and this stands contrary to the intention of conservation that has been provided for under both the UNCBD as well as the Biodiversity Act of 2002. Further, as we have learned that the government wants to promote cultivation or commercial cultivation of the medicinal plants, and as such, the cultivation of the medicinal plants has now been exempted. However, a concern has been raised by the activists that it is practically impossible to detect which plants are cultivated while which are found in the wild. And that is why this particular issue or the loophole can be exploited or misused by the large companies to evade the requirement for prior approval and sharing the benefits with the local communities, because even without commercially cultivating, they can indulge themselves in the utilization of the medicinal plants that are found in the wild or the plants that are found naturally, even without sharing the benefits with the local communities. So these are few concerns that have been raised regarding the amendments that have been brought to the Biological Diversity Act. Although this is a news in transition, because even now the government will take the views of the public as well as it can be referred to a committee of the parliament in the near future. So as and when these amendments get finalized, this topic will become important for us. However, we should be aware of the basics of the amendments that have been brought. To learn more about Biological Diversity Act, you can always go through the prelims compass of environment ecology, which is available on the eLearn platform freely. So do understand these aspects from the preliminary examination perspective from the prelims compass of environment and ecology. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 3 talks about revival of the economic growth. In this regard, you might all be aware that the National Statistical Office had released the quarterly GDP estimates for the second quarter of the financial year 2021 and 22. And based on these GDP estimates, the authors have highlighted that the Indian economy is yet to recover from the recession that India is witnessing in the past 2 years. Now, the main focus of the article is that the consumption expenditure and the investment in the Indian economy is yet to reach the pre-pandemic level, and that we all are aware is crucial for the economic growth. So the authors have highlighted that the key lies in government's ongoing emphasis on infrastructure spending, which is reflected in the capital expenditure. And that is why the authors highlight that capital expenditure can form one of the important pillars for revival of economic growth. Now, as far as the quarter 2 GDP data is concerned, it has been discussed in detail in the last week in current affairs, week 5 of November. So you can go through this DNS related to the Indian Express Explained and the Hindu DNS supplement to understand how to read the quarter 2 GDP data. However, in this discussion, we will restrict ourselves to trends in revenue and the capital expenditure in India, what is the case for increase in capital expenditure, and what are the concerns and challenges that are likely to be faced if capital expenditure keeps on increasing. So let us discuss all these issues in this article. Now, if you are aware about the budget of the Government of India, you might be aware that the expenditure is seen in terms of revenue expenditure as well as capital expenditure. In this regard, the capital expenditure is that amount of expenditure that is used for asset creation, while the revenue expenditure is mainly dealing with the day-to-day functioning of the government or the money spent in the administration. So capital expenditure, which is focusing on the asset creation, is considered to be key for infrastructure development as well as economic growth, because that is leading to development of the assets in the Indian economy. So simple thing that we need to understand here is that if the capital expenditure of the government is increasing, it is a good sign for the economy. While if the revenue expenditure is increasing, it is not a very encouraging sign, because lot of money is used in only day-to-day administration and is not focusing on more number of asset creation in the economy. And that is why we compare the trends in the revenue and the capital expenditure in India. So in this slide, this article highlights that the share of revenue expenditure in the total expenditure has increased from 73% in 1990s to about 84% in 2021. So this means that the revenue expenditure, which is not considered to be a good sign for the economy, has been increasing in the last 2 to 3 decades, because it constituted only 73% in 1990s, while it has increased to about 84% in 2021. Now, as compared to the revenue expenditure, if you look at the capital expenditure, this capital expenditure has reduced from 27% in 1990 to about only 12% in 2021. So this shows a clear decline in the capital expenditure. So what we see is that the capital expenditure has reduced while the revenue expenditure as a percentage from the total expenditure has increased. So this basically means that these are not good signs for Indian economy in terms of the government budgeting. So after looking at the trends in the revenue expenditure and the capital expenditure, we are clear that the revenue expenditure as a percentage of total expenditure of the government is increasing, while the capital expenditure as a share of total expenditure of the government is decreasing, which is not a very healthy sign. This is because the fiscal deficit of the government of India has been increasing, and this fiscal deficit is being used for funding revenue expenditure rather than capital expenditure, and that is a cause of concern. So, only when the fiscal deficit is funding an increase in the capital expenditure, it is considered to be a good quality fiscal deficit that the government is incurring. Otherwise, if it is being utilized for revenue expenditure only, then it is not seen as a good sign for government's budget as well as the health of the economy. Now, if you look at 2021's data, out of the total fiscal deficit of 18 lakh crores, the share of revenue expenditure stood at around 14.5 lakh crores, while only remaining 3.5 lakh crores were spent for capital expenditure. So this clearly shows the high amount that the revenue expenditure has in the government's expenditure. So this brings us to an important conclusion that in India, there is a case for increasing the capital expenditure. And why is capital expenditure important? Let us look at all these aspects. So in this regard, if the government of India increases the capital expenditure, it can lead to the revival of the Indian economy, because it is understood that if the government increases the revenue expenditure, it does not lead to increase in the GDP. However, if there is increase in the capital expenditure, it has a multiplier effect on the GDP growth rate. So it is sometimes highlighted that if the government increases its capital expenditure by rupees 1 crore, then it leads to an increase in the GDP by around 2.45 crores. However, if similar increase or increase of 1 crore is provided for in the revenue expenditure, it would only lead to an increase in the GDP by 0.99. So we clearly see that the capital expenditure has a greater impact on the GDP growth rate, and that is why the government of India should focus on increasing the capital expenditure. Further, when the government increases the capital expenditure, it helps in crowding in the private sector. This is because the investment by the government of India by the way of capital expenditure on the creation of assets leads to increase in the demand for goods and services that are produced by the private sector. So basically, it also increases the growth rate of the private sector and increases the demand for the goods and services that are provided by these private sector entities. Further, when the government of India increases its capital expenditure for the asset creation, it makes the Indian economy investment driven rather than the consumption driven economy. And this was also highlighted by the Economic Survey of India in 2019 and 20 that the government of India should move from consumption driven economy towards an investment driven economy, which is crucial for the revival of economic growth. Also, when the government focuses on capital expenditure, it leads to infrastructure development in the economy. We all are aware that India has to spend $4.5 trillion on infrastructure by 2030 to sustain its growth rate. And as such, higher capital expenditure would lead to creation of the world-class infrastructure like roads, railways, ports, etc. Further, since the capital expenditure is used for infrastructure development, it might lead to a reduction in the logistical costs, and they are very crucial for improvement in the GDP growth rates. And last but not the least, it will lead to higher employment generation. Now, although there are certain potential benefits of increasing the capital expenditure, there are various concerns and challenges that have been highlighted from time to time. So let us look at these concerns and challenges by the increase in the capital expenditure. Now, looking at the challenges in increasing the capital expenditure, first is that the capital expenditure, if it is over focused upon, is sometimes seen as being against the welfare approach. Now, we all are aware that the COVID-19 pandemic has increased the instances of poverty and has led to an increase in the inequality. In this line, some of the economists have argued that direct cash transfers and benefits should be transferred to the weaker sections of the society. This will boost the consumption expenditure in the long run and also will help in development of or socio-economic development of the poor people. However, if the government over focuses on the capital expenditure only rather than providing welfare to these sections, it might have adverse impact in the long run. Further, we note that the capital expenditure, if it is conducted on infrastructure development, these projects have long gestation period. And as such, the expenditure on the creation of these assets would not yield immediate impact on the economy. And that is why only the benefits of such expenditure can be seen in the long run. Further, although the government might focus on increasing the capital expenditure, However, given the situation that is prevailing in the Indian economy, where already the non performing assets of the banking sector are increasing and the private sector is already facing stresses due to the COVID 19 pandemic, it might not lead to commensurate increase in the private investments. And looking at the situation that has been unfolded because of the COVID 19 pandemic, the people might also be reluctant to increase their expenditures and might over focus on the savings. And that is not a good sign for the economy. The fourth important challenge with government increasing the capital expenditure is that it leads to crowding out of the private sector because the money in the economy is limited. And if the government borrows more, it sometimes leads to non availability of funds for the private sector to increase their investment levels, and that is known as the crowding out of the private sector. Further, a concern has been raised that the time and the cost overruns in completing the infrastructure projects could lead to lower rate of returns and will make these projects financially unviable in the long run. So the need of the hour is to make or complete these infrastructure projects timely and in a cost effective manner. But that remains a challenge till date for the government of India to complete the infrastructure projects within time and also in a cost effective manner. Further, if there is poor quality of asset creation by the way of capital expenditure of the government of India, it can further lead to higher recurring expenditure on the maintenance cost, and that will again be a big challenge for the government's budget. So, summarizing the challenges, sometimes it is seen that if the government overfocuses on capital expenditure, it might not lead to welfare approach, or it is sometimes seen as against welfare approach and immediate support that the government needs to focus or provide to the weaker sections who are facing the difficulty due to the COVID 19 pandemic. Further, the government projects have sometimes long gestation period, and that is why there are fears that they might turn into non performing assets and would further stress the banking sector. Further, it is difficult for the private sector to increase its investments because of the uncertainties that are faced in the Indian economy because of the COVID 19 pandemic. Also, there are fears that if the government increases its capital expenditure, it might lead to crowding out of the private sector. And if the time and the costs are high on these projects by the government of India, this would have adverse impact in the long run. Also, there is a need for focusing more upon quality of the asset creation because if the quality of the asset is poor that is created through the capital expenditure, there might be more costs on the maintenance in the long run. So that is not a good sign for the economy. So these are some of the concerns and the challenges that have been raised in this regard. So in this regard, it has been said that the government's focus in the budget of 2021 on capital expenditure is right. However, the government also needs to focus on removing the hurdles in full realization of the potential of these capital expenditure. That is why the government needs to focus on improving the ease of doing business, and also the government should focus on realizing the full potential of the development banks as well as the nation monetization pipeline that has been conceived. So these are some of the benefits of increasing the capital expenditure, and these are some of the concerns and the challenges in full realization of increase in the capital expenditure and the related increase in the GDP growth rate. With this, let's take up the next news article now. This editorial on page number 6 is regarding the semiconductor mission that has been unveiled by the government of India. In this regard, the Union Cabinet has outlaid rupees 76,000 crores for supporting the development of semiconductors in India. Now, semiconductors are crucial input in the electronic development, and that is why the government is now focusing on increasing the homegrown semiconductor industry. Presently, the semiconductors are produced only by a few countries like Taiwan, South Korea, as well as China. In this regard, semiconductor, which is an important input in various other equipment development, plays a crucial role for India to focus upon. And that is why let us look at the key issues that the semiconductor sector is facing right now, especially in the context of the COVID 19 pandemic, and what India needs to do in this regard. Now we need to first understand that electronics industry is world's largest and the fastest growing industry, and it has application in almost all the sectors of the economy, including the automobile industry, medical equipments, or mobile technology or internet related technology. Everywhere the electronics industry is playing a key role. And a key component in the electronic industry is the semiconductors. So the semiconductors are a key enabler in the advancement of the electronics industry, and they will play an even greater role with the introduction of new technologies such as Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, 5G technology, as well as smart cars, smart factories, etc. Now, in this context, even when we realize that the electronics industry is likely to grow at a larger pace and will have a crucial role in various sectors. The crucial input in the electronics sector, that is semiconductor, has seen a severe shortage during the COVID-19 pandemic. In this regard, the COVID-19 pandemic had shut down the factories that focus on manufacturing of these semiconductor chips specifically. Another issue that is visible in the semiconductor fabrication is that even though it has utility in almost all the sectors, the microchips are manufactured only in few countries including Taiwan as well as China. And that is why there has been severe shortage of the microchips across the globe. Further, there has been an increase in the demand of the semiconductor chips because of its increasing utility now. Now, the need for technology for working from home, fluctuations in automotive sector, and deployment of 5G infrastructure, etc., have given a push for increasing use of semiconductor microchips. And also, there has been supply chain disruptions due to closing of shipping lines as well as non-availability of containers due to the issues faced by the supply chains during the COVID-19 pandemic. And all these factors have combinedly led to a global shortage of the semiconductor microchips. Further, India, which is focusing on increasing the share of the electronics industry in its economy, is also facing the issue of accessing these semiconductor fabricated microchips for the production in the electronics sector. And some of the challenges that are faced in development of the semiconductor fabrication in India is that the semiconductor manufacturing is a complex and research intensive sector. Further, this industry is also capital intensive in nature, and that is why both these stand as a key issue in the creation or development of semiconductor manufacturing in India. Also, rapid changes in technology are also witnessed in the semiconductor microchip production. And that is why the players in the industry need to keep pace with the rapidly changing technology to be relevant in the global electronics industry or become an important player in the semiconductor production. Further, regarding the electronic products that are produced in India, the semiconductors play a crucial part as an input in these electronics production. So after looking at the challenges in the development of semiconductor fabrication or production of semiconductor microchips in India, let us look at why it becomes crucial for India to produce these semiconductor microchips. So in the recent years, electronics manufacturing has substantially increased in India, and the National Policy of Electronics 2019 aims to develop India as a global hub for electronic system design and manufacturing, and it also aims at creating an enabling environment for industry to compete globally. In this regard, the government has already started focusing on the development of the semiconductor microchips in India, and that is why the cabinet has taken this decision of allotting 76,000 crores for microchips development. However, besides allocation of such hefty amount, there are certain steps that the government needs to take care of. So in this regard, the government needs to incentivize and attract foreign investment in setting up the semiconductor fabrication in India. Further, we are aware that ease of doing business is one of the hurdles in manufacturing in India, and that is why the government also needs to facilitate ease of doing business for microchips manufacturing. The focus also has to be on research and development in the semiconductor design and fabrication technologies. Also, the government needs to mandate some of the public sector firms for fabrication of these microchips in India. So these are some steps besides the allocation of money that the government has allocated that the government can take to further boost the semiconductor manufacturing in India. With this, let's take up the next news article now. This article on page number 8 is related to the 52 habeas corpus pleas that are pending in the Supreme Court of India. And that is why this writ of habeas corpus becomes important for us from the prelims examination perspective. Now, if you go through the fundamental rights chapter in the Indian polity, you will understand that there are certain fundamental rights that have been provided for in the Indian Constitution, and for the enforcement of these fundamental rights, the writ jurisdiction has been defined for both the Supreme Court as well as the High Courts related to the fundamental rights. And the writ jurisdiction of the Supreme Court has been provided for in the Article 32 in the Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. In this, one of the important writs that is provided for is the habeas corpus. Now, this habeas corpus literally means to have the body of. Now, this writ is generally issued when a person has been detained unlawfully. And that is why under this, the court issues an order to a person who has detained another person to produce the body of the latter before it. And the court then examines the cause and the legality of the detention. So in case a person has been detained and this issue comes up in front of the Supreme Court, the court will analyze if there is enough legality in the detention or not. And if it is found that a person is detained unlawfully, the relatives of that person or friends or any other person can move to the court by filing an application under Article 226 in the High Courts and Article 32 in the Supreme Court for the writ of habeas corpus. And if court finds that the application is valid, then the court will issue this writ of habeas corpus literally for that person to be produced in front of the court. Now, this writ of habeas corpus, which is provided for in the Article 32, is seen as very crucial bulwark for individual liberty against arbitrary detention. Because unlawful detention is the hallmark of a dictatorial government. And that is why this has been provided in the Indian Constitution in the fundamental rights that there cannot be arbitrary detention of any person. And that is why this cannot be misutilized by any government or person in this regard. And it is described as the first security of civil liberty of the citizens of India. Now, further, this writ of habeas corpus can be issued against both public authorities as well as private individuals. So, this is a very important fact for us from the prelims examination. However, there are cases when this writ cannot be issued. This cannot be issued in case of the detention is lawful, that is, the detention has been done in a legal manner or based on a law. If the detention is by a competent court or detention is outside the jurisdiction of a court. And we all are aware that the writ jurisdiction has been provided for in the Article 32 under Part 3 of the Indian Constitution, that is in the Fundamental Rights chapter in the Indian Constitution. That is why the writ jurisdiction is seen as key to protecting the fundamental rights of the citizens of India. So these are few important facts for us from the prelims examination perspective. Learn more about these writs from the Fundamental Rights chapter from the Indian Polity book of Lakshmikant. With this, we conclude today's discussion, and this is the question for the day.